let us start our next topic, barriers to communication. बहुत सारे questions have come up from this particular section. मतलब, I mean, in every paper there would be 1 or 2 questions asked from this particular topic. All right. So let us just start discussing barriers to communication. Now, number 1, we'll discuss about barriers to communication. All right. And then we will also understand in today's class listening, its styles and types of listeners. What all are they? All right. So starting with barriers to communication. Now, why is this a topic in your syllabus and why it becomes important to understand? See, किसी भी communication को to make it effective, to make it more effective, all right, it can become that way, that it can become more effective only when people understand, when they actually accept and act upon the information which is transmitted. All right. When they understand, accept and act upon the information which is transmitted, that only can make your communication effective. So basically the sender of the message must be aware about what kind of barriers can be there which can actually hamper his or her communication to be actually received by the receiver in the particular way the sender wants to send it to the receiver. All right. So इसीलिए understanding the barriers is a very important thing. All right. So we will first of all understand about the barriers. Now, let me just tell you that there are basically 3 kind of barriers, basic 3 kind of barriers. So number 1 is personal barriers. All right. What is a personal barriers? Personal barrier, it basically arises from the human emotions, or we can say values, or we can say attitudes, or we can say beliefs. जब कोई भी personal thing is hampering your communication, and what is the most personal thing? Your emotions, your values, your attitudes. All right, so this becomes a barrier. So here various examples are, for example, let me write it here. Example, premature evaluation. For example, a sender, a speaker is speaking something. लेकिन सुनने वाला person, he does not listen to the whole conversation, and even before the whole conversation is completed, he prematurely evaluates कि अच्छा, he wants to tell this thing, or he can make judgment about the speaker also कि he is like that, he is not actually communicating in a very well way. So this is premature evaluation. Like before the communication has taken place in a full form, prematurely they evaluate the information. Then is lack of attention. For example, the speaker is speaking, but the receiver is not listening to what the speaker is speaking, or he is actually being distorted by various kind of noises behind him, or in his own mind there is a chaos going on. So it leads to lack of attention, and that becomes a kind of personal barrier. All right. Then there is lack of transmission. It is also kind of personal barrier. Now, what is this lack of transmission? When a message is actually passed through so many people, all right, then, for example, one person is talking. He wants to pass this message to, A wants to pass the message to person B, but there are so many other people here, X, Y, Z, or communication, the message goes from A to B via all these people. So the truthfulness does not remain the same of the message which it was earlier in that case. All right. So this causes lack of transmission. When the truthfulness of the message, the authenticity of the message is being harmed because it has been traveled from so many people in between the communication process. All right. Next, we can call poor retention also as one of the kind of personal barriers. Retention. All right. Poor retention means when the listener is not listening to the speaker properly, he would not be able to actually understand first of all, and then to receive, and then to retain what the actual message was being said. जैसे कि अभी, if I'm teaching you people, all right. So if somebody of you सुनने के साथ साथ if you are eating food, you are doing your lunch or you're doing some another activity, this would lead to poor attention. Then you again would have to go through the recorded videos, or you would hush up to and go to the written material which is being provided. So it would lead to poor attention, yani ki there is a barrier in the communication. Also, distrust is a thing. What is distrust? Distrust means when you do not trust the speaker. If you think a speaker is speak, for example, I am talking, and if you have made up your mind initially only, okay, this maybe she is not a good teacher. So there is a distrust which has happened. Even if I try my level best to make you understand certain facts, you won't be able to understand because you have that kind of distrust created for me in that manner. All right. So these are the examples. Why I am telling you these examples? Because बहुत बार questions have come up जहाँ पे सीधा सीधा ये दे देते हैं कि what is premature evaluation? Is this a personal barrier, or is this a physiological barrier or a semantic barrier? So these kind of examples you must learn and you must have these in your mind while you finally prepare for your paper. Okay. Next, what we'll talk about is physical barriers. Acha, physical barriers are basically, I would want to tell you that these can be of two types. First is environment. All right. Next up is biological. Biological, or we can call them as physiological also. Now, environment में अगर कोई issue है physical, what can it be? Maybe there is technological issue. For example, initially in our only class we have faced the issue with the pen today. All right, this was this technological issue when I had to restart the system. तो वो एक physical issue, technical issue है. It is there in the environment and we call it as a physical issue. Technical issue, there is network problem, network issue. All right, there is this, for example, the weather is not nice, the environment is not suitable for conversation. For example, if it was a physical classroom, okay, and there is a 40 degrees temperature, 45 degrees temperature outside, and there is no AC in the class, would you be actually able to listen to what I actually want to convey to you? No, because which is would be affecting you. The weather, the climate would be affecting you because आप बहुत ज़्यादा uncomfortable हो रहे होगे उस situation में. So these are the examples of environmental or physical barriers. Subset environmental barriers. Now biological, physiological, for example किसी का ill health है, speaker या receiver का, ठीक है, there is a eyesight issue है, ठीक है, there is this eyesight issue, there is hearing loss, ठीक है, all the problems with the body or with the physiological makeup of the person, speaker or the receiver, it leads to the physical barriers. All right. Acha. Environment, may I want to tell you one, two, three things, etc. is time and distance between the people can also be considered as the environmental barriers. Plus, surplus of information is also regarded as the environmental barrier or the physical barrier. When you have been provided with so much of information, for example, आज if I try to cover 4 topics, क्या retention उतना हो पाएगा? No. Would you be able to understand? No. So surplus of information itself becomes a barrier. Last but not the least is semantic barriers. Semantic barriers, you already know about the meaning of semantic, I guess. Meaning of semantic is the barriers related to the meaning of the words in the sentences. All right. Meanings. If they are not being, understood the way the speaker wanted them to be understood. All right. So meanings when there is misunderstanding, or we can say misinterpretation. So this leads to semantic barriers. Now what can be the examples? Examples can be badly expressed messages, or we can say the symbols or the words which have more than one meaning. More than one meaning words. All right. faulty translation, if the person is not able to translate properly what the speaker has actually said. So these kind of problems also leads to the semantic barriers. Also, if the person is using technical jargon, so these are also included in semantic barriers. Now, very important thing I want to tell you here is about the types of semantic barriers, two basic types. Although these are also the examples which I have stated, these are also the types of semantic barriers, but though technical terms which are used for the types of semantic barriers is number one, denotative. We have read also in previous classes, and connotative. Now, what is denotative and connotative? Denotative is basically related to the objective meaning of certain terms, and connotative means the subjective meaning of certain terms. As I have told you in the previous class, for example, हम किसी भी word का एक example लेते हैं. For example, the word love. I have already took the similar example in the previous class. If you see the meaning of the term word in the dictionary, that would be the denotative meaning, all right, the objective meaning. But if you actually love someone, your pet, your partner, your parent, it would have that feelings attached to that word, that word that becomes subjective in nature. So semantic barriers, how can these be barriers? Because if you want to tell somebody with full of feelings that I love you, maybe the another person takes the meaning as denotative कि इसने तो ऐसे ही बोल दिया, for example. So this would not be the kind of meaning you wanted to convey through your word. All right. So these are the kind of semantic barriers. All right. So we have done three kind of barriers, three main kind of barriers here: personal, physical, and semantic. Under physical, we have done two subtypes: environmental barriers, all right, circumstantial barriers, we can call them. Next one, biological and physiological barriers, all right. I want you to just understand about the examples of all these barriers, because questions can have come up and had come up and will come up from such kind of what we say information. All right, we will do also in the the end of the class. Acha, chalo. Now let us just understand about various other kind of barriers to communication. See, sometimes what I've tried to cover here is jahan se questions, the topics from where the questions have come up. Sometimes the questions come up from specific terms, asking you about specific terms of the barriers. All right. There was one question in last year only, if you have gone through the paper, previous year paper, about the sequence of, communication barriers was asked. Okay, there was the sequence. So specific to keeping that in mind, I want to tell you here that there was this person, Daniel Robbins, plus other authors with him. They have given this kind of sequence of barriers. All right. Why I am telling you this? Because question has been asked and it is an important thing to know. All right. Plus individual terms पे भी questions can be asked. So there is this sequence. So now which all barriers we'll study here, these will be in sequence and these all have different meanings to them. So the first one is filtering. Now what is filtering? Filtering actually means that when a sender purposely manipulates the message to be seen by the receiver in favorable terms. All right. So he actually wants to manipulate the message. क्यों? ताकि जो receiver है, he takes the message in a way which the speaker wanted to convey. So this is filtering. Filtering is manipulating the information so that the receiver see it more favorably, or how the sender wants it to be received. All right. This is filtering. Why filtering is a barrier? Because you are not being true to your information, because you are manipulating the information here. Okay? You are filtering the information here. Next up is selective perception. Now what is selective perception? Selective perception is basically filtering, a type of filtering only. This is A type of filtering. It is basically what we see or what we hear according to our own needs and desires. It is selective perception. If a boss, for example, let us take an example. If a boss has given a list of tasks to his or her employee, all right, and the employee, if he looks at the list, he sees that there are a lot of tasks being given. Yaar, kaun sa pehle karu, kaun sa baad mein karu? So what he'll do, he pick out some tasks which he thinks are important, and then he will first complete those tasks, and maybe later he'll finish up the other tasks. So what he did is, he kind of filtered the message which was given by his boss according to his own needs and preferences. Type of filtering, receiving the message according to own needs and desires. All right. This is filtering. Information overload. Next one is information overload. Now, what is this information overload? Information overload, it is self-explanatory. I was telling you also, जब information बहुत ज़्यादा है, when the information is too much, what would happen? People would tend to select ही करेंगे, पूरा information they cannot take. All right. If either they will select, or they will ignore, or they will pass over, or we can say simply forget about the information only. So these all things can happen because of information overload. This is the result of information overload. All right. Next up, emotional disconnect. Whenever there is interference of emotions in your communication, it is called as emotional disconnect. When the speaker and the receiver, when they have no emotional connect between each other. So even the speaker would not want to tell the receiver what he wants to tell, and even the receiver would not want to understand the message of the speaker. All right. So this is emotional disconnect. Also, it also portrays one more thing, that if the emotional state of the speaker or the receiver is not well, okay, so it would also hamper the communication. Emotional state of the speaker and receiver plus the disconnect they have. All right. Emotional state, maybe they are upset with something or something else. So it would hamper the communication. All right. Agar abhi, for example, we are in a classroom, but if you get to know something which is not very good, or which is not a very good news, you would not be able to, attend the class with that full enthusiasm and what we say, with that energy which was earlier in you when you started listening to the class. So this is a kind of example of emotional disconnect. All right, last is language. Language, or we can use the word polysemy also here. Polysemy. Now, what is this polysemy? It is basically when a word or a phrase which is used, wait a second. A word or phrase which has different meanings. So it would also become a barrier to the communication. क्यों? क्योंकि it would lead to misunderstanding. All right. So misunderstanding, misinterpretation, all these things would happen if you do not understand the language, or if the words are polysemistic. All right. Which have different meanings. So what we have done here is other types. These are other types of barriers. All right. And this is also a kind of sequence of barriers also. Filtering, selective perception, information overload, emotions or emotional disconnect, and then the language. All right. Next one. Now we would understand about selectivity in communication. See here, we have seen this selective perception as a thing. All right. Now this selective perception, extending this topic, we would try to understand about the concept of selectivity in communication with the help of 4 basic terms. What all are these? First is selective exposure. Now, what is this selective exposure? Selective exposure is basically when you accept, when the individual tries to accept the communication, let me write it here, accept the messages, when they accept the messages consistent with their own attitudes and beliefs. All right. When they accept the message which are consistent only with their own attitudes and beliefs, that is selective exposure. All right. Information बहुत तरीके की आई है उनके पास, but what they listen and what they understand is which is actually consistent with their attitudes and their beliefs. All right. इसमें there are many things which impact this thing. First is involvement. Involvement is when you're a part of some group. All right. For example, when your own group is talking something, आप उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा attentive होगे. But if the another group is talking something about any topic, I don't think you would be much, interested in the person who is talking and what is the issue they are discussing. So involvement is a thing here. That is, you are trying to accept the message only which is consistent to your attitudes. That is only which is there in your own group, the issue which is being discussed in your own group. This is the factor of involvement. Another factor here is proximity. Proximity is when one message, an important message, is first delivered and then the another less important message is delivered, but आप दोनों को equal importance के साथ समझोगे. All right, this is a kind of mental state which actually happens. So you would also accept the another less important message to be important and to be in line with your attitudes and beliefs. So proximity is a thing. All right, next is utility. Obviously, you would try to see what message is useful for you and which is not useful for you. Even the utility of the person who is speaking is counted here. Next is reinforcement. If you see the information would help you in some way, then you would receive it more properly. And if you think that information is not that very important, or if that particular that particular information do not fetch you much valuable inputs, you would not be attending to that information. All right. So this is selective exposure, when you try to accept a message according to your attitudes and values. Next up is selective attention. Now, what is selective attention? Selective attention is basically when you admit only certain messages to your cognition. Certain messages, attention is the word, messages to your cognition. That means when you only try to decode only certain specific messages which you think you can actually decode and which you think you can actually understand. For example, while watching a English movie, agar there are some people who are not very good at English, lekin this selectively, when you are watching a movie, they selectively would attend to only certain terms which they can actually, understand, when they actually can add them to their cognition. All right. They do it according to their cognitive ability. So this becomes the selective attention. Here also, there are some things which plays some role, which is novelty. Novelty is if there is something new. All right. So they would all get your attention much faster. All right. You would think, yeah, this is something new. I should, attend to this and I should try to understand what actually it is. So novelty is a factor. All right. Concreteness is a factor. Concrete, that means जो information बहुत concrete, concise होगी, you would easily be able to understand that information. So concreteness is a thing. Also utility. That means if the information is useful, you would attend to that. Achha, next one is selective perception. We have already discussed about what actually selective perception is, but one more time, here we see that we interpret the message according to our own belief system, our own value system. All right. Attending not attending actually, interpreting. You interpret the message according to your own attitudes and belief system. Beliefs. All right. So what is the difference between selective exposure and perception? In selective exposure, you are accepting of the messages only those messages which are according to your needs. But यहाँ पर selective perception में आप सारे messages को interpret ही उस तरीके से करते हो जिस तरीके से आपके attitudes या beliefs form हो रखी हैं. ठीक है? So here we can have various factors here as well. For example, if there is I think there we can take the example of biasness. Yes, biasness. Biasness is a factor here. Why? Because when you are taking things or interpreting things according to your own understanding or your own belief system, so biasness is a factor which would play a role here. Again, utility is a factor. If you think that understanding this particular message or interpreting is to my usefulness, then you would obviously try to interpret that message and make that utility according to your own belief system of that message. All right. Another factor here is we need to actually reduce the ambiguity. Biasness plus ambiguity is a factor that comes here because you would not be able to actually interpret the message in accordance with what the speaker wanted to tell you. You would understand or are interpreting the message according to your own purposes, your own value system. So it would lead to ambiguity. It can lead to ambiguity. All right. Next, last but not the least is selective retention. Now, what is retention? It is similar to selective perception, but a little different. क्यों? क्योंकि यहाँ पर आप सिर्फ उन चीजों को याद रखते हो जो कि आपकी जरूरत के हिसाब से. All right, you recall information according to your own needs and desires. All right. So कई बार क्या होता है when you do that, there can be redundancy. कई बारी चीजें becomes redundant because you do not pay attention to other things which have been told you, or you do not recall those things. You recall only those things which you think are important. ठीक है? For example, in a class, if certain topics you have already covered, ठीक है, you may not want to retain those factors. You may pay attention to only the topics which you may not have understood or have studied anywhere else. So half of the information which I am telling you becomes redundant also, ठीक है, and this would become redundant in your mind also because you would not recall it later because you don't think it is useful. All right. Utility again, जो चीज utility भरी लगेगी, you would pay attention to that also. All right. There is primacy factor also. You would primarize things also. ठीक है, prioritize things, which is more important, which is less important. Only those things you would try to understand. These factors actually are given in your booklet also. I have seen your booklet, and then you can try to make the understanding clear from them, and then you can also do the read about the parts also, such as I have told you, like involvement, proximity, utility, reinforcement, all these stuff. All right, you can do it from there as well to make the understanding more clearer. So selectivity in communication is of 4 types: selective exposure, attention, perception, and retention. All right. Now, listening in communication. So what is listening? Listening is speaker says something, the receiver listens. When the receiver provides the feedback to the speaker, so he also listens. So listening is basically important on both of the person's part, speaker as well as the receiver. All right. Now, listening has various stages. Let me tell you. What? सबसे पहले the message will be received. All right. Then it would be Understood. Understanding is the next step. All right. Then what will happen? You would try to remember what is being told to you. All right. Then you would try to evaluate the message, evaluate or analyze the message, maybe newly or by attaching it to past memories and experiences. All right. So evaluating and analysis. Finally, what happens will be feedback. You would provide the feedback. He will and he will as well. So this is the kind of stages which are there in the process of listening. Receiving, understanding, remembering, evaluating and feedback. All right. So learn these stages like they are written here. All right, questions can, I have seen many questions in the previous year paper to 2021 that various questions have come up from sequence. All right, कुछ basic terms हैं, उनको भी they have asked in sequence. So try to remember things that way. May happen in this year exam also. All right. So try to learn things in that manner. Chalo. Now we will understand about styles of listening. What are the various styles of listening? So number one is empathetic and objective listening. All right. दोनों चीजें अलग हैं. Empathetic is when you are listening with your feelings attached. Objective is no feelings attached. Taking the message, taking the words, I would say words and sentences as it is without attaching any feeling or emotions to that. All right. Next one, non-judgmental and critical. What is this non-judgmental thing? Non-judgmental thing is when you listen with open mind. All right. Listening with open mind. When you do not put your own judgments to the speaker's message. What is critical? Critical is when you try to put your own mind here. You want to analyze and evaluate the message. All right. This is non-judgmental and critical thinking. Then comes the surface and the depth listening. Sorry, thinking, nahi, listening. Now, what is this surface listening? Surface listening is basically when you listen only to the messages only from the surface. That is only the words and, the sentences which are said, you just heard them and your job is done. All right. You do not try to understand the underlying meanings in that case. All right. Just literally reading of words and sentences. All right. What is depth? Understanding depth is you try to understand underlying messages. Underlying, what we say, meanings of words and messages. All right. Next up, polite and impolite. Now, listening can be polite, that you're politely attending to what is being told to you. All right. Kaise? You want to, if you speak in a way, when you want your listener to be attentive and when you are a polite listener, you would nod your head. You would show gestures that your speaker understand that you are listening to the person or the speaker. This is politeness. All right. Attending politely. All right. Impolite is when you want the speaker to understand that you are not interested. So this is impolite listening. When not interested in the message, you would call it impolite listening. All right. You would show it to the speaker through your gestures. Then comes active and inactive listening. It is self-explanatory. Active listening is you are understanding the words also, the underlying meaning also, meanings plus contexts also, plus you are also analyzing the message, everything you are doing, then you are called as an active listener. Inactive, opposite to active. All right, that is not paying attention to what is being said. All right, so this is active and inactive style of listening. Next is type of listeners. A very short topic, फटाफट से we'll do it. Type of listener. How many type of listeners are there? Number one, first is non-listeners, जो सुनते ही नहीं है, ढीठ किस्म के लोग, ठीक है, बैठ गए हैं भीड़ में, but they don't listen at all. So non-listeners. Next is marginal listeners. Now what are these marginal listeners? Marginal listeners are those which actually are listening, but they are also distracted by various factors. For example, padhate samay, if I'm teaching you, you are listening to me, and if you are eating also, you are doing chatting also while you are studying. So these you become a marginal listener at that point of time. All right, that means they are easily distracted by the environmental noises also. All right, and for marginal listeners are also those which actually are in a hurry to reply to the speaker, and they do not try to listen the whole information which is being delivered. All right, so basically they get too busy in preparing the reply before they listen to the whole information which is being told to them. All right, so these are the marginal listeners. Next is evaluative listeners. See, if you see it clearly, this is also in a kind of sequence. Non-listeners, marginal listeners, then evaluative listeners. Evaluative listeners are actually they hear the information actively, all right, but no effort is there to understand the intent behind the message or the intent of the speaker. All right. Fourth one, active listener. These are the best kind of listeners. They hears also. Hears, check. Understanding, check. Intention, check. All right. Evaluation, check. Feedback, check. So these are the kind of listeners who are considered as the best. All right. They listen effectively and they are good speaker as well on most of the time. So this is non-listeners, then marginal listeners, evaluative listeners, and active listeners. These were the kind of listeners. All right. Now moving ahead, this was the last topic in listening. So let us first and quickly do the practice questions now. All right. So first question, semantic barrier of communication is implied when, what is the meaning of semantic barrier here? Anyone? It is a very easy question. Rashmi, Somita, good. Anyone else? Yes. Yes, the correct answer is D. When the receiver do not understand the meaning of the message. All right. Bindya. What is unclear, Bindya? The question? Semantic actually is related to the meaning of the message. So the meaning is related to semantic. So what is the semantic barrier here? When the receiver does not understand the meaning of the message. Okay? I hope I'm clear. Next question. Okay, good. Which of the following are barriers to effective communication? Physical noise, semantic noise, psychological noise, non-semantic noise. You can do this question by elimination method as well. Yes, Rashmi, Shailaja, Sri, very good. Yes, all of you are correct. The correct answer is, sorry, B here. Why? Because non-semantic noise is not, it is actually an absurd word, all right, an ambiguous word, so we cannot include it here. Next question. Some of the barriers to effective communication are, which all are the barriers? Very easy questions, okay? Very easily you can attempt this question by elimination. Do you know the meaning of cliches? Very typical language which is used. Boring, it becomes boring. So, all right, Rashmi. Yes, anyone else? Somita. Yes. ANC. Yes, everyone is correct here. The correct answer, Bindya, Shelja, very good. The correct answer is D here. What the hell is happening? Chalo, next. Which of the following will help overcome the communication barriers? Which thing would help? If you listen focusfully, focus listening, neglecting the noise, top-down command structure, use of cliched idioms. Rashmi, Sri, very good. Shelja, good. Yes. Soumita, very good. I'm so proud of you guys. Everyone are correct. Bindya, no, actually neglecting a semantic noise would not overcome the barrier. Okay, when you're listening focusfully, then you can overcome the barrier. Neglecting a noise is still there, no? So focusing by listening is the best possible thing. Okay, so A is the correct answer here. All right, next up. We listen attentively to and favorably interpret messages जो कि हमारी सेल्फ इमेज को बूस्ट करते हैं, which boost our self image and reject or misinterpret messages which threaten that image. All right, when we do that, क्या बोलेंगे उसको? What do we call that? Last topic we have just done. Anyone? Yes, Bindya, correct. Rashmi, correct. Sri, correct. Anyone else? Where are others? Soumita? Okay, all of you are correct. Communication selectivity. We have read 4 types of this selectivity. Okay. Now, next one. What are the barriers to effective communication? Chalo, 4 are the things. Easy question, elimination, say it can be done. What are the barriers to effective communication? Answer. Shelja, good. Shri, good. Soumita, good. All of you are correct. The correct answer is A. Okay. Because dialogue, summary, self-review is not a barrier. It is a good thing. Using of simple words, cool reaction, defensive attitude, it is a good thing. Personal statement, eye contact, simple narration is a good thing. Acha, defensive attitude, do not get confused, because sometimes carrying a defensive attitude makes you a good speaker. Okay. Next question. Which of the following is an example of physical barrier to communication? Very easy one. Last year it has come in your paper, 22nd November 2021. Sri, very good. Rashmi, good. Soumita, good. Very nice. All of you are correct. The correct answer is D. Okay. We have read Shailaja, Bindya, good. We have read physical barriers में 2 things, environmental and physiological. All right. It is a part of physiological barrier. Okay. Next up. According to Robbins et al., this was I was talking about, the sequence of barriers to effective communication in an organization is. What is the sequence? We have read about this question. Abhi, 2-3 slides back. Shelja, Rashmi, Bindya. Correct, correct. E. Shilpa, correct. So this is, answer is D here. Okay, say filtering is number 1, selective perception is number 2, information overload is number 3, emotions or disconnect is 4, and language is 5. All of you are correct. Next one. Okay, these were the 8 questions from this topic. So I hope you have understood and enjoyed the class. Okay, if you have any doubts, you can ask your doubts also, and then any query related to anything, you can email us at contact@humanperitus.com. Okay, anyone, any doubts, or shall we end the class? Chalo. Okay, thank you so much, guys. We'll see you in the next class. Okay, the rest of the topics of communication we will try to finish up in our next class. All right. Chalo. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.